Morning, Trevor.
Hello. How are you today?
I just wish it would get easier, man.
Yeah,
Just for a little bit.
yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
We can hear the motor in the background.
Sorry. Just...
It's like we're on a spaceship. Doesn't bother me. Annabelle's in here, but maybe it bothers her. She didn't say anything. I think it's okay. See my screen. Can helpful. You can see my screen now, right, Trevor? Don't forget to foam in when you. Don't forget to sanitize your hands when you come in. Unless you've done it elsewhere already, then it would be totally fine. Don't forget to sanitize your hands. We don't have backup plan. That's why I got an email about that. I think we actually had to do this much stuff.
I don't have to do it.
You don't? I can do that.
I have I'm in the marketing class too, so I already know.
Oh. Oh my God. Start once again. Some more people. Good morning, Gabby. You wanna, Trevor and Gabby, you got, oh, you just did it. I'm sorry. I talked right over you. If you want to say hi again, everybody can hear you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. You folks can say hi too if you want to. Folks here in the classroom.
Hi, guys.
Thank you. Trying to make it normal. I'm trying. I know it's not. Let's see. Missing quite a few people. All right. Well, good morning. Good morning, folks at home. Good morning, folks here in the classroom. Week number 2. Thanks for logging into the Pear Deck. Thanks for being here. Agenda for today. We'll do our check-in. It's a quick one. And then we're going to begin to move on away from ecology and ecological interactions and all those sorts of things and begin to dig deeper to unpack what's going on inside of a living system when something eats something else. Really begin to get into the nuts and bolts of energy transfer, how energy actually moves within a living system. So I really have some kind of like some preview questions for you to look at first individually, to just so I can get a sense of what you know and what you don't know, maybe from physics and chemistry. And then we can target all or just a few of those questions as part of a larger lesson on the movement of energy through a living system. Because of course, at this point, whether you were in physics or chemistry, you really probably haven't focused much on living systems. So that's really agenda item number 3, and then we'll wrap up with an exit slip. Before we start though, questions, comments for the good of the group? Okay. I hope silence equals okay. All right. Well, honestly, I did not think we were going to be in the building today. I thought there was going to be another transition over the weekend, but there wasn't. So as I thought about how we could start today with our check-in, I thought it might be useful to think about where you were emotionally last week and where are you today, this morning, emotionally. And we would come back to this, meme check-in in order to accomplish that goal. So you've got a blue flag to kind of mark where you were last week and a yellow star to mark where you are today. So let's just see if any themes emerge. There's only a few of us, of course, so we're not going to be able to get a big picture like we have in the past when everybody was together, even through Zoom. But just to get a sense of where you were last week and where you are this morning. Just a way to check in with how we're feeling today. All right. Things have stopped moving. So let's see. People can't see that. See what you drive. So there's, again, not a lot of us, but we're kind of moving from a place last week of 2s and 3s, so koalas and cats. There's a dog get hit with a frisbee too. There's a couple people who had upside down panda. I wonder what that means for you. I'm wondering if you're willing to share what that means for you. And then today, a lot of yellow stars around that, I don't know, complacent cat, accepting cat. A couple of really tired, I think it's a sea lion down the bottom, number 9. Anybody willing to share a little bit about how their feelings have changed from last week compared to today? Not everybody at once. Oh, thanks, Pablo.
I'll share, but can I move over there for the next short?
Of course you can.
I picked the panda for last week because I felt kind of lazy last week. Like I didn't do a lot. But also I still had a good time. Like I think it was good to change things for me. I don't think online school was working. Like I hoped I hoped it would have.
Okay. So grateful to be back in school, if I were to paraphrase, because what was happening in the past wasn't really working for you individually.
I can share, I guess.
Thank you, guys.
So my first one was the dog getting hit by a frisbee, and that's because my afternoons weren't as productive as I had hoped with the day off from school, and because I felt like I wasn't getting my work done, so it was literally whacking me. And then I switched to was that a sea lion or thing?
Sure.
And 9 in the corner. I switched to that thing because now, well, right now I'm tired and I don't want to think about the work, so I'm kind of suppressing that.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Anybody else want to jump in? If I were to share, if I were to model sharing, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear last week. So probably I'm going to be in that 2-3 range, koalas and cats. A cat really spoke to me this morning because I felt like the message I was getting as an adult in the building was just smile and be positive. And I don't know that I could bring myself to do that organically because of that fear and anxiety. It was so real for me. Today, honestly, if I could drag a dot for myself, if I could drag a star for myself, it would probably be like a number 6. That, I don't know, that dog would just kind of like, really? This is still happening? Huh. All right. Well, here we are then. The real reason, though, I wanted to share this with you this morning and get started with this morning is to remind you that there really is only one constant in life, and that is change. So I'd be willing to bet that each and every one of you had different animals, right, for last week and for today. And that's just, once again, evidence for the fact that things change. And no matter where you might be today, chances are you won't be there, heck, a couple of hours from now in terms of your feelings. And sometimes that might seem obvious, and sometimes that might seem impossible. Like, of course I'm going to be stuck in this feeling indefinitely. But in reality, feelings come and go. They're strong, they're weak, they change. And that is one of the constants about what it means to be a human being. So that's our check-in for today. Thank you to those who shared, whether you're here or not here. Shall we jump into the biology? All right. So I wanted to remind you of the complexity of some of these feeding interactions that take place within living systems. This, of course, is the wildebeest food web from the Serengeti that we looked at, gosh, I guess a week or so ago now. And of course, you need to memorize every single animal at every single trophic level. You need to be able to draw the arrows from memory, right?
Yeah, totally.
Thank you, sarcasm. Finally, you guys are looking at me so seriously. That's ridiculous, right? You would never be asked to redraw this from memory. It's way too complex, right? But what I'm hoping you took away from last week, right, kind of thinking from the beginning all the way to the end, is that there are bottom-up and there are top-down trophic cascades, right? Bottom-up trophic cascades tend, not always, but tend to increase species diversity because they're going to increase the amount of available energy that moves from the lowest trophic levels, the producers, the autotrophs, to the higher trophic levels, the consumers, the omnivores, the carnivores, what have you, okay? Top-down trophic cascades, not always, right, but often, tend to limit species diversity, right, because they're going to put a pressure on omnivores, on herbivores, maybe even on producers, depending on what those species at the highest trophic level are feeding upon. And as a consequence, push the numbers, maybe even push the diversity of species within that system down. But then at the end of the week, right, we looked at a role of a producer in terms of serving, right, as a lower trophic level species, exerting a bottom-up trophic cascade on the system. I'm thinking about the garlic mustard, of course, and how the garlic mustard was releasing a chemical into the soil that disrupted the mutualistic interaction between a fungus and the roots of those woody trees. And as a consequence, even though it was a bottom-up trophic cascade, right, where we might expect species diversity to increase, what we actually began to see is that the garlic mustard was acting as a long-term planner, right, that it was fundamentally altering its system in a way that promoted its own survival and reproductive success, right? Thus, limiting species diversity really down to the point at which it was the only species that was probably going to be surviving in that system in the future, okay? So the point that I'm trying to make, right, is that these systems are ridiculously complex. The only way we can really understand them is to study them carefully. And you should never be trying to memorize aspects of them. You should be looking at them and trying to unpack what you're seeing in respect to the movement of energy, right, through the system and how that ultimately can influence species diversity, but also begin to think about some of the ecological interactions that are in place that also really, due to the impact of natural selection, also maintain species diversity over the course of time. Because in short, more diverse systems are more stable systems. Less diverse systems, think of the Cavendish banana, right, are much more prone to failure, to collapse over time. So let me pause there. What questions is that bringing up for you? Yeah, Jeremy.
This doesn't like specifically have to do with it, but because like the garlic mustard isn't eating the other plants or the trees, and then it's also not like a parasite, what is this? Is it commensalism? Because it's harming the other plants, but it's not, and it's benefiting them, but it's not like the other do.
Yeah, so you might remember there was, we did a little bit of work with this wildebeest food web and trying to place the virus that caused rinderpest disease in the wildebeest, like within that food web. And we found that it kind of belonged in a gray area, right? It wasn't really exerting a bottom-up influence. There was no evidence for that, but it also wasn't exerting a top-down influence because it wasn't eating the wildebeest, right? It was causing harm to the wildebeest. It could even kill the wildebeest. So it was acting top-down, but it wasn't consuming them, right, by eating them. So in the case of the garlic mustard, it's tricky, right? Because they're not really parasites, right? They're not directly harming the fungus. What they're doing is disrupting the interaction between the fungus and the woody trees, which actually ends up doing harm to the fungus and the woody tree. So they too exist in this gray area in terms of the ecological interaction. So much so that we really have to, we don't even talk about it in a class like that, we have to classify the interaction differently. Really what they're doing is acting through what's referred to as indirect allelopathy. They're disrupting an interaction which is crucial to the survival of the plant and to the fungus. And by doing so in a bottom-up manner, are harming the system as a whole.
Okay.
There isn't going to be a clear, we can't argue for commensalism. I heard you say commensalism, right? Because you could argue, okay, well, the garlic mustard is being favored, but the other species aren't being harmed, right? Well, that clearly isn't the case. They are being harmed.
I was just asking kind of because, like, am I allowed to talk about questions on the summative things overnight?
Sure.
Okay, because the warblers, I think, were benefiting because, or you know, they were harmed because they had a lower chance of survival when the cuckoos were in the nest with them. But the cuckoos were benefited, but they weren't eating each other. Or wasn't parasitic. But you had to pick.
So the way, remember the caveat being that no matter what you answered, you're always going to have a chance to go back and make corrections, right?
Okay.
So you're going to get feedback. But since most people have submitted their assessment at this point, the way those questions are set up, if I remember correctly, the first scenario describes a parasitic interaction, and the second scenario describes a mutualistic interaction as part of that question.
Okay.
And we could unpack that more once you get your feedback, if that's helpful. All right. Is it okay to move forward? So really, again, the goal for today is to begin to explore the transfer of energy within a living system in more detail. Okay. So what I have set up for you, and I will give you control of the slides, are a few questions. They start with divide and conquer, okay? Where ultimately we're beginning to think about the movement of energy through a living system. So what I'd like you to do, probably take, I don't know, there's 5 or 6 questions, so probably 6 or 7 minutes, but I'll check in with you after about 6 minutes to see if you need some more time. Look at each of these questions and pose the answer that you think makes sense to you, okay? With the understanding that you may not know, you're just taking your best shot using what you do know, okay? That way I can see your thinking using Pear Deck, and then we can circle back and tackle all or just a few of the questions that are most relevant to your needs right now as a learner, okay? So take about 5 or 6 minutes, and actually, why don't we do this? Let's do about 5 or 6 minutes, and then I don't think I did a very good job last week with breaks. Let's build in 10 minutes total. Take a break, a 2 or 3 minute break somewhere in there as well. So I'll check in with you at 8:38.
So for the first one, like, how are we supposed to like answer? Like, use a symbiotic thing, or
In this case, you're filling in the blank with a word. It's not going to directly connect, right? This is new. It's not going to directly connect to a symbiotic relationship or to a direct feeding relationship. If you don't know the answer, that's totally fine. You're in essence, don't write I don't know, but answer what you think it could fit. Answer with a term that you think could fit in that blank. That's okay if you're not sure. Things are looking good so far. Number 4, you can once again circle the term that you think fits best too. It's a draw slide. I don't think I wrote circle your answer. And then you can type in the blank if you'd like, or you could write in the blank. Do whatever works best for you. It's also important to note too that there may not be one correct answer for those blanks. I think if you have a choice between 2 terms, I'm trying to set the stage for there being one correct answer there. But you know what? That is true. Let's see if I can. Well, since I won't be able to change that without ending the Pear Deck session, why don't you just, if you had a piece of paper and a pen, if you could just sketch it, that'd probably be the best way to do it. I don't think. Yeah. I'm going to be able to change that in real time. I'll change that for the next class. Sorry about that. But of course, type a description if you find that to be easier to use. If you want to draw it or you don't think you know how to draw. Just trying to get a view of your thinking with input. You finish, you want to take a break, stand up, you can walk around, you walk around the classroom, walk to the water fountain, go to the bathroom. Take care of yourself. Nobody wants to stand up and stretch, walk around. You can sit all day. Do its best for you.
Are these like one of the things that are a reason why we take bio after physics and chem?
Yes, and yes, because it's what we're able to do here at CHS, because that's what you do as students. But it's important to note that there are schools all around the country, all around the world, that actually teach biology before physics and chemistry. So a lot of this learning is embedded into biology before you learn it in physics or chemistry. So be grateful if you can for the sequence.
Yeah, my mother is against learning physics first for some reason.
I mean, for years and years, I taught biology before chemistry, and I found myself teaching pH and acid-base chemistry and chemical reactions and all those sorts of things because they were just a fundamental component of life science. So, you know, I'm grateful that you folks have such a strong background in physics and chemistry before you come in here. But I'm also mindful of the fact that for many of you, this is your first exposure to life science in high school. That also is very, very unique. There are very few high schools in the country that offer AP biology as a first-year life science course to high school students. All right. Ready to come out together? Which of these questions would you like to go over, or would you like to go over all of them?
Go over all.
All of them, says Miguel. Anybody else voting for all of them?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I haven't taken physics yet, so like, is it normal that like I don't know how to do any of this?
I think you might be on a slightly steeper learning curve, but you're going to be able to catch up pretty quickly because even though having physics and chemistry is helpful in understanding this, I think you're going to see pretty quickly that it's not required. Yeah, we're trying to build an understanding of energy transfer in a biological context, in a living system. Okay, right. I have one vote for all of them. Do I have other votes for all of them? Trevor's nodding his head yes. Pablo saying yes. Annabelle, okay. All right, thank you, Rory. All right, so I'm actually going to take you out of student mode here because what I have done is taken those same questions and, in essence, added kind of my notes to them so that we can talk about them. All right, so this first question dealt with a metabolic process that breaks down molecules and releases energy into the surroundings, right? So if we're thinking about a living system, we're thinking probably, right, about something eating something else, breaking it down, digesting it, if you will, and somehow extracting energy from the molecules that it's consumed, right? So this is what heterotrophs are doing all of the time. But we don't want to exclude autotrophs from this process as well. Because while autotrophs, right, are making their own sugars through photosynthesis, at some point they're also going to have to break down those molecules and extract energy from them so as to power their vital processes. So when we talk about metabolism, some of you kind of noticed I had those terms on a previous slide before the question. We're really talking about two processes that fit under the umbrella of metabolism. There are catabolic or catabolism, catabolic processes, and there are anabolic processes. And simply put, catabolic processes break down molecules, and the breakdown of those molecules is going to lead to a release of energy, okay, often to the surroundings in the form of heat. Anabolic processes are the opposite of that. They are going to be used to build biological molecules, but in order to build those molecules, we're going to have to absorb energy from the surroundings. So you can begin to think about this, and I like to kind of start with anabolism, right? Because in anabolism, we're thinking about, or we can think about photosynthesis in plants, right? Plants make molecules, right? They make sugars from carbon dioxide. But the only way they can accomplish that is by absorbing energy in the form of sunlight, okay? So the absorption of light is serving as the driving energy force or driving energy source to build more complex biological molecules. That's an anabolic process. Now, again, plants do this, but so does every consumer on planet Earth. A catabolic process is going to be used to break down those biological molecules so as to extract energy. Okay? And as that energy is extracted or removed, it's going to drive the biological processes that require energy. Okay? So sometimes we kind of use like the term metabolism a little loosely, like I have a high metabolism, but I bet you tell me, right? If you say that, if you've ever used that term, you've heard that term, I bet when you say I have a high metabolism, you're thinking about just the catabolic half of it. Is that fair? I don't want to put thoughts into your head, right? But to truly have a high degree of metabolism means that you're breaking down molecules efficiently, but you're also building new molecules efficiently, which probably means, definitely means, in fact, that energy is being transferred from one process, the catabolic process, into the anabolic process so as to make it happen. Because as a consumer, you're not absorbing light from the sun. Questions about that? Okay. So again, a lot of you noticed the terms that I put on the food web diagram to start with. And I use different font sizes really just to highlight the relevance of the different processes within the system. So up top, right, where the consumers are, the higher trophic level species are, I made catabolic bigger, right, because they're relying on catabolism to drive, right, to provide a source of energy for the anabolic processes. So they're still occurring, okay? And then down below where the producers are, where the autotrophs are, I made anabolic bigger because again, they're requiring photosynthesis, right, to absorb the energy that's necessary to build biological molecules, but we can't forget that those producers are still going to execute catabolic processes so as to extract energy from the very molecules that they build. All right. All right. The second question, I noticed a lot of you were doing pretty well with this question, an exergonic chemical reaction. So before I even go any further, if we're talking about an exergonic chemical reaction, do you think that would fit under the catabolic umbrella or the anabolic umbrella?
Catabolic.
Yeah, the catabolic, right? Because if we were to draw, I hope you can see this on your end okay, a energy diagram for an exergonic process, this is a generic reaction, right? We're starting with reactants at some energy level. So in this case, it's what, molecule AB and molecule CD. We have to invest energy into the system, right? We have to energize those reactant molecules so that those molecules can reach their activation energy threshold. Okay, so hopefully you labeled that as part of your energy diagram. And then after the reaction takes place, energy is going to be released so that the products of that reaction have less energy than the reactants do. What we're trying to say as biologists, right, is okay, great, I can identify a reaction diagram for an exergonic process. Okay? But what does that energy do? Where does that energy go when it's released from an exergonic catabolic process? That's what we're trying to build an understanding of in biology that is different from physics or chemistry. All right? But take home, exergonic processes are going to be catabolic processes because they release energy into the surroundings. As biologists, what we're trying to wrap our heads around is, okay, great, you're releasing energy. What is a living system going to do with it? What is a living thing going to do with it? Because ultimately, we want to harness that energy in anabolic processes that we know require energy to happen. Wonderings, questions, curiosities. Keep going. Third question. This is an important one to biologists. In fact, for the video that you're going to watch for next time, the narrator highlights it, I think in a pretty nice way. The second law of thermodynamics simply states that there is always going to be an increase in the disorder of the universe. As a biologist, we're often thinking about the universe as the surrounding, so anything outside of the system. Now that system could be a single cell, it could be a single organism, it could be a single population living within an ecosystem, it could be the entire ecosystem itself, it could be planet Earth, right? Don't you spend a lot of time in physics defining the system? Yeah, so in many ways in biology, you can do the same thing. We can define the system as whatever we want it to be. It's a relative determination. But ultimately, what's most important is that whatever's outside of the system, in respect to the second law, the disorder outside of that system is always going to increase, okay? What you're gonna see in the video next time is that many, shall we say, anti-evolutionists, so these are your creationists, are going to argue that, well, haha, that's why evolution can't happen, because evolution allows for more ordered systems to exist. And doesn't that violate the second law? And it doesn't, because you can have a more ordered system as long as energy is leaving that system and moving into the surroundings so as to make the surroundings more disordered than the ordered system inside of it. So don't fall into that trap. It's something that anti-evolutionists will often use to confuse novice biologists. All right. So how does this connect to what we've done in the past, right? Well, again, when we think about the flow of energy through a living system, we think about energy entering the system in the form of light at the level of our producers, right? And yes, there are these chemoautotrophs that exist in extreme environments, but set them aside, put them on the table for a second, or the shelf for a second, okay? Energy enters the system in the form of light. Our producers use photosynthesis to build biological molecules through anabolic processes, so they're absorbing that light energy. The absorption of that light energy provides the energy necessary to build those molecules anabolically, okay? Those molecules, right, if I'm a plant, would be eaten by an herbivore, right? And then herbivores are going to perform catabolic processes to break down those biological molecules to extract energy from them and then move that energy, use that energy to build their own molecules through anabolic processes. So I'm hoping you're beginning to see and hear that energy is always moving once you get past the producers from a catabolic process to an anabolic process. And the producers is a little bit different. Energy is always moving from an anabolic process to a catabolic process. Okay? It's a little bit different. But the real reason why I like this figure so much is it's showing us how the surroundings are always going to be allowed to increase in disorder, how entropy will always be increasing outside of the system. And that's due to the movement of thermal energy, of heat from the system out into the surroundings. That's a given, okay? Because as we dig into the actual reactions that are taking place, whether they're catabolic or anabolic, heat energy, thermal energy transfer will always be happening. There is no such thing as a 100% energy efficient energy transfer within a living system. Energy will always be lost in the surroundings in the form of heat. And it's that transfer of heat energy that allows the surroundings disorder to increase and for the second law of thermodynamics to be met. Okay. All right. For the sake of time, let's skip this. All right, number 4, in an endergonic reaction, well, this takes you back to chemistry, I hope. In an endergonic reaction, is energy released or absorbed? It's absorbed. So pausing there for a second, what does that mean? Is an endergonic process going to be catabolic or anabolic? Anabolic, because energy is moving into or out of the system? Into the system. Okay. So there's a connection there from chemistry, right? In endergonic processes, well, when you get into endothermic, you're specifically talking about the transfer of heat energy. What we're going to begin to develop next time is that in respect to heat energy, it is a terrible form of energy to drive life processes, right? In fact, it's just not used in living systems, right? And you know this, right? Because last night was kind of chilly. Maybe you already have the thermostat set pretty high in your house, but I bet you put a blanket on last night, right? And the blanket isn't giving you heat, it's trapping thermal energy close to your body so as to keep you warm. That energy that's being released into the surroundings by your body is just, it's energy waste, right? It's not being used to drive any sort of biological process inside of you. It's constantly escaping out into the surroundings. Okay. So a little bit different when you use the therm rather than the gone. Okay. So again, as we think about this and as we put a bow on class today, right, the idea is that there are these catabolic exergonic processes that are releasing energy, right? And the energy released from those processes somehow has to make their way into endergonic anabolic processes, okay? But that energy that's being transferred from the exergonic process to the endergonic process, from the catabolic process to the anabolic process, it's not going to be heat. It has to be something else. And really over the course of this week, we're going to be unpacking what that something else is. But for today, what I want you to take away with you is this idea that there are two different processes that are taking place under the umbrella of metabolism, and they all have to do with the transfer of energy. Okay. But that energy transfer, it ain't heat. It's something else biological. So I think when it comes to number 5, and for the sake of time, we'll circle back and we can start next time with number 5, because I can actually show you we can draw the transfer of energy from one process to another. And just to provide a slight spoiler alert, anybody heard of the molecule called ATP before? Did you learn about that in middle school maybe?
Yeah.
ATP is going to be the molecule that serves as the energy transferer, if you will, from one of these processes to another of these processes. But I can diagram that for you next time. All right? All right. I want to stop there. And if you could, before you leave or before you sign off, did a little bit of work here on energy transfer. The learning objectives are up here on the slide. If you could just quickly type in a sentence or two, what did you see today? What did you learn today that connects to one or more of those science ideas? Just as an opportunity to reflect.
I have a question.
Of course.
So in one of those last diagrams, I saw entropy on there, and I was wondering like what that is, because I remember the word, but I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, entropy is what chemists and physicists refer to as disorder. It's a measurement of disorder.
Thanks.
Right. So as soon as you've added your brief reflection, you can sign off, you can take off. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of your day and week.